All right, thank you for bearing with me there. Sorry about the little technical hiccups there, everybody. Now, finally, the webinar software is working. I can see your questions and everything. What's up, Colorado, DC, San Francisco, Denver, South Carolina, Boise, Texas, Michigan. Wow, Ottawa. Hey, cool, my old hometown. Yeah, Minneapolis, Knoxville, Brooklyn. Oh, man, this is cool. All kinds of people in the house. Yeah, wicked. All right, cool. Well, hey, welcome and thank you so much for choosing to spend your time here today. I'm really excited about this presentation. I've been working on it for oh man, I've been working on this presentation for, I guess, a year now, making little tweaks here and there, and I think it's finally reached its final form. So you today are going to get the best version of the breakthrough that anyone has ever gotten. So yeah, stay with me till the end, and I will give you some of the notes to download. Also, there are members of my team that are available to answer any questions that you may have during the presentation. Just type them into the chat box, and yeah, my team will do the best to get back to you as soon as we can. Yeah, and at the end I'll do a little Q&A. All right, cool. So enough preamble. Let's get to it. So yeah, welcome to The Breakthrough. This is a presentation that I have put together that is all about breaking through the blockage and the resistance and all of the other stuff that is keeping you from getting what you want out of your time in the studio. My goal here today is to not only teach you about music, but teach you how to unlearn a lot of the things that are holding you back. So we're going to delve deep into human psychology and kind of unclog the works, and then we're going to talk about productivity and different things that you can do to get more out of your time in the studio. Yeah, hit up any questions that you have in the chat. I can see your questions, as can the team. And yeah, without further ado, let's get going. So today we are going to learn how to finish quality music, keyword quality. No one wants to make a bunch of boring crap. How to finish quality music without tons and tons of gear, without tons of music theory, and without making painful mistakes and getting upset by them. If you stay till the end, I will give you these notes to download and review at your leisure. My goal in life right now, my goal is to make 1,000 professional musicians, to launch 1,000 careers. I'm going for the Lifetime Achievement Award in the music biz. And I just you know, my mom is a teacher. My mom's a school teacher. She spends a lot of time giving back. My dad is a full-time professional guitarist. So it's kind of, you know, no big surprise that I'm a musician and I teach. I love teaching. I love running into people who I've taught later and having to be like, oh man, I was struggling so hard and you totally fixed the thing for me. Yay, it's the best. So in trying to make 1,000 music careers a possibility, I have adopted this motto: be who you needed when you were younger. Be who you needed. So I'm trying to basically be who I needed. When I was coming up, it was not easy. We'll get into it. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I learned how to make it not suck. And I share that. And that's my gift to you today. So who am I? Well, my name is Dylan Lane. I'm known professionally as ill.Gates. My first experience with music was sampling farts when I was about 7 years old. Very quickly realized that I loved sampling and I loved electronic music. Bought a set of decks when I was 13 and DJ'd my way through high school, playing at all these different raves and stuff. And then I moved to the big city, in my case, Toronto, to seek fame and fortune in the music industry. And I went to this booking agent and I was like, okay, here I am. Here's my resume. Here's my mixtape. Let's team up. And they laughed in my face. They were like, oh my God, kid, you can't just show up with a resume? What do you think this is, a job application? Like, that's not how the music industry works. If you can't sell tickets, we can't sell you. So you got to go out there and you got to make some music, you got to make some fans, and you got to become an in-demand artist, or else you have no need for a booking agent and we have no need for you. So I was a little disheartened, but I went back to my house and I got out my crappy little 486 megahertz PC and a copy of Acid Pro by Sony, which is like the most simple DAW ever. You just have one sample per channel, pencil, eraser, scissors. Those are the only tools you have. Like you can cut, you can paste, you can draw in samples. That's it. You know, there wasn't any automation or EQs or anything, right? So I go back there and I just sit down at this crappy little DAW and just started cutting up samples from my record collection and asking people on the internet, going on producer forums, just networking with other producers who are helping me learn. And one day I logged into this tiny little website called NeptuneXVI.com. It's like ages ago. And I had a new flashing direct message and I clicked on it, and it was this guy, the Incredible Melting Man from Two Wars of Revolution Records, and he wanted to sign me for a record deal. So I was like, wow, okay, you know, that was like my third ever track, but I guess here we go. So I went into this meeting with all these other producers, and I was like a child, you know, I was like 19 years old. I mean, can you imagine if this happened to you? Right. So I'm in there with all these experienced producers, and right away I'm like, oh my God, I'm in over my head. I don't know what I'm doing, what's going on. But they sign us all for album deals, and then we all start talking. Everybody's like, what do you use? And the one guy would be like, oh yeah, I got an SSL desk and like all these hardware synths. And the next guy would be like, oh yeah, I'm using Logic and blah, blah, blah. And then it came my turn, and I was like, I'm just cutting up samples. I don't even own monitors or anything. And everybody was scandalized. They were like, oh man, you got to get a pair of studio monitors. You got to start learning music theory. You got to learn about compression. You got to learn about EQ. You got to learn about VST and automation and dithering and all this stuff. And it was really overwhelming. And then I also was trying to make like the best music of my life while being totally confused and totally stressed out. And it gave me the worst case of writer's block ever. You know, I got an infinity of things that I can learn over here and an infinity of like technological possibilities. And then like, I got to come up with one perfect record to launch my career. And it was more than my little brain could handle. So I got really depressed. I stopped going out. I would just spend all my student loan money on music equipment and like never go to anybody's birthday parties or like do anything. And I was really depressed. I hated myself. I thought I was a bad producer. I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. And it was a real bummer. And then after about 18 months of this, I was just at my wit's end. So I had a little bit of a epiphany, and I was like, look, I need to stop treating other artists as like competition and just like start treating them as collaborators. Like there's no shame in asking for help. I'm going to call up one of the guys from that meeting and just ask for help. So I called up Dave Dubb, who is a very talented producer. He's one of the, I think probably the first ever Canadian breakbeat artist. But anyway, I called him up and I was like, look, Dave, I'm hating my life right now. Making music used to be fun when I was just doing it for shits and giggles, but now that it got all serious, I'm bummed out. I got writer's block. I want to make the best music that I can make, but right now I can't even finish anything, and I'm just so upset. And Dave was like, hey man, that's cool. It happens to everybody. It's normal. Just like, let's do a collab and I'll show you how the workflow works and it'll be fine. So we went and did a collab and it was super fun. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not all artistically constipated anymore. This is great. And then once I knew the workflow and I knew how to like finish tracks in a day and not just sit there working away at them forever and forever, I was like, man, I gotta tell everybody this. So I would mentor people and tutor people and stuff, as well as DJing. And by the time I was done school, when I was 23, I was able to support myself with a combination of like teaching and producing and, making music for like ads and video games and like, for hire kind of producer stuff. And then also mentoring people and ghost producing, like all kinds of stuff. I wasn't like rich or anything, but I was able to live the dream and be a full-time professional musician. And one of the things that really made a big difference was I made the first ever commercial Ableton templates way back in like 2004, 2005. I don't think anybody was doing like commercial Ableton templates back then, but there's this old YouTube video where it's just me. I got a goofy helmet on. I'm showing people how to use a trigger finger, and there was just an email, and it was like, hey, send me money on PayPal, and I will send you the template. And that was how it worked for a bit. That was like what started my whole online teaching business, was just this one shitty YouTube video with a PayPal link at the bottom. And if you're a musician and you want to start working in the industry, that's all it takes. Just make a useful YouTube video that shows people that you have like samples or sounds or whatever, and people are out there hunting for that. If you have like a template or some sounds or you do mastering or whatever, just make a quick YouTube video, make it cool, and people will start hiring you. So because no one else was doing Ableton templates, suddenly I'm the Ableton template guy, and everybody's asking me for Ableton templates. Like all these big artists are hitting me up. I was posting on the Ableton message board all the time, and I was just like, it got to the point where I was just explaining things to people like again and again and again. So I created a lot of these really fundamental techniques, like the 3 phases of production, that's the 3, the 3 sections in a song like A, B, and C, and this other technique called 128, which is where you make a sample selector so that you have a whole folder of samples in a sampler and then a sample selector to select through the folder. Because a lot of the time, like any sound sounds great when you listen to it by itself, but in the context of your song, a lot of the time after the track's been worked on for a bit, your awesome kick drum just doesn't sound so awesome anymore. And the instinct is to just start piling plugins and plugins and plugins and trying to force it to fit. But actually, you probably just need to switch your kick drum. So I would take these whole folders of samples and put them into samplers with a knob where you can change samples. And people ate it up, and that technique is taught at like every Ableton school. And any commercial sound pack is going to have one of those like 128 sample selector knobs in it. And I was even like reading Computer Music Magazine the other day, and I was checking out this tutorial, and they were like, yeah, we've got a drum rack full of 128s, and I was just like, they adopted my terminology. Yes, I'm totally going to brag about this. But yeah, so that was, being the inventor of Ableton templates and then the inventor of 128s and stuff, people were just hitting me up all the time. So I ended up teaching at the School of Audio Engineering. I did a whole tour in Australia 2 years in a row where I would do workshops at the School of Audio Engineering. And then that led to me becoming an official Ableton artist, Isotope, Fab Filter, Keith McMillan Instruments, Dave Smith, Make Noise, DJ Tech Tools, tons and tons of different companies. But that was kind of like what I did to pay the bills. Because the thing is, when you're a musician, the dream is to like write as much music as possible and make the best music you can. But even professional musicians, it's no one's really paying you a lot of money for your studio music. Like unless you're like, you have like Billboard #1 hits licensed in like the Fast and the Furious or whatever. No one actually pays you to make music. And a lot of the time, people will end up where they'll like have a job and they'll be doing music as a hobby or whatever. And then suddenly their job becomes being a musician, but they end up just being on the road all the time because that's typically how you make money. And then they don't end up with any time to write any new music, and then you get burned out and done. So a lot of the time, unless you have a kind of diverse system to support yourself to be able to afford the time to be in the studio, it can be a real trap. So, teaching and doing templates and stuff allowed me to stay in the music sphere so that I was still doing music, I was still around musicians, I was still learning, but, that was like, it stopped me from starving, basically. There's 2 approaches, right? There's the bamboo approach, the panda approach, rather, where, pandas, they only eat one thing, so they're starving all the time, and they can't make enough fat to make milk for their little baby pandas. And then the trash panda, aka the raccoon, they're thriving because they're omnivores, and they can eat everything, right? So this is my omnivorous approach to supporting yourself as a musician. I really do encourage you to adopt an omnivorous approach as opposed to just depending on gigs or just depending on licensing or just depending on whatever. Because if you're depending on one thing, it's feast or famine, and when that thing wavers, you might get sick of the instability and find yourself seeking more steady employment, right? So definitely take the raccoon approach. So that was my raccoon approach, and that enabled me to afford the time to make 5 full-length albums. I've released over 200 songs as official ill.Gates releases, and as my other alias, the Fat Conductor, before. I've been in the iTunes top 10 for the electronica category many times. I've done collabs with Bass Nectar, Excision, Mimosa, Pretty Lights, Yodo, Eskimo, Beats Antique, Amon Tobin, tons of other producers. And I've had a lot of fun doing it. It's been a good time. It's been a good time. So really, like, a lot of this is a game of inches. It's like, I used to think like that I would get this big break, and like, you know, I'd just be grinding and grinding and grinding, and then some magical, there would be one big thing that like turns the page, and it's all nothing but net after that. But that's really not how it works at all. There's not really any one big thing that's going to come like fix everything for you. You know, it's really just a steady grind and just getting yourself to a position where you can afford the time to make music again and just keep rolling the dice, because you can't manipulate luck, but you can take more chances, you know. And if you want to get lucky, you just got to play the odds and put out a ton of music and just stay in a place where you're part, like you can't just try the music industry for 6 months and then have it either work out or not. Like you gotta stay in it for a while and keep rolling the dice, and eventually you will get lucky. But if you adopt the raccoon approach and you don't just depend on one thing, I know it will happen for you. You just gotta roll the dice a ton of times. So I went to Burning Man, and Burning Man is great because it's like one of the only places in the world ever that there's not enough DJs. Normally there's too many DJs, and if you want to play, like, get in line, you know. But at Burning Man, you got like 300 sound camps, and they're all running like sometimes 24 hours a day for like a week, right? So that's a lot of time slots to fill. So you can go, if you get a ticket, you can go on Burning Man message boards and be like, hey, here's my demo, who wants to book me? And you know, a lot of people who run stages are pretty cool, and they'll be like, yeah, come by, play our stage, you know, we'll take care of you, and blah, blah, blah. And you can end up getting a ton of gigs and making some fans. So I just did the message board thing and went down to Burning Man and got a ton of sets. And I met all kinds of people who were like actually cared about my music. And they were asking me all kinds of like really intelligent questions about like my first record and like where certain samples came from and stuff. And I came back really refreshed because I was like, wow, you know, like Burning Man is such a inviting culture, and people are so into, you know, into radical individualism and into, you know, into people being their weird, freaky selves. This is great. And I realized that, you know, the Fat Conductor as a alias was a mistake. You know, like I had made too many compromises with that alias. So really that Burning Man 2006, that was where ill.Gates was born. I went back, got rid of all like I deleted like all my unfinished Fat Conductor music, and I was just like, that's it, I'm done. And started being ill.Gates. And as soon as I started being ill.Gates and put the intention in to be like my authentic self, fuck the trends, fuck the people who don't get it, I'm just gonna like be me and make my weird music and just be myself. And as soon as I started doing that, all the doors started opening. So I really got to say thank you, Bass Nectar, and thank you, Burning Man, for that. So then I was a total convert, and I would play Burning Man every year. And this camp is a little camp called False Prophet, and this is like a super nerd camp. And they would do like the hot party on Tuesday night. You can see they got a function one, but they don't have a ton of people there. You know, it's a tiny little camp. Like there's like, it's pretty much all just like nerd crew, like people who do PhDs in ayahuasca and like civil rights lawyers and stuff like that, right? So, but they really liked my music and liked my sound. And I was playing at the False Prophet camp one Tuesday night, and a woman in the audience, his name's Danielle, who later became my friend, she was enjoying the set, and she asked her boyfriend, she was like, oh, what's this music? This is interesting. And he was like, oh yeah, that's ill.Gates. And she was like, ill.Gates, huh? Hilarious name. Kind of like my boss, Bill Gates, because she worked as the general manager of Bing at Microsoft. Now, remember how that happened, because that's going to come into play later. So November of that year rolls around, and I get a phone call from Danielle at Microsoft. She's like, hi, this is Danielle from Microsoft. Is ill.Gates there? And I'm like, oh no, they're going to ask me to change my name, or maybe it's a prank call or something. Like, can you imagine if this happened to you, right? So I'm just like, oh no. This is terrible, right? So I'm kind of like trying to stall with her on the phone and making small talk and stuff. And she's like, yeah, we want to book you for a gig at the Sundance Film Festival at the Bing Bar, you know? And I was like, okay, right. You know, I didn't think it was a real booking. So I'm like, so you're from Microsoft. Do I get to meet Bill Gates? And she's like, well, yeah, I guess he'll be there. Yeah, I guess that could be arranged. Is that one of your conditions? And I was like, yes, that's one of my conditions. I get to meet Bill Gates or I totally don't play. And she was like, okay, well, sure, you know, what are your other conditions? I like named like, you know, some money and a work visa and all this stuff. And the next thing you know, boom, plane tickets, chalet rentals, and I am partying with Bill Gates. It blew my mind. I got to get drunk with Bill Gates for a night. It was wild. I still can't believe this shit happened. And while I'm hanging out with Bill Gates, Danielle's sister rocks up and she's like, hey, blah, blah, blah. I'm working on some ringtones for our social media program for the Windows phone. And Danielle's like, hey, you should get Dylan to do your ringtones. She's like, okay, sure. Hired. And then she's like, so first I'd like take all my tracks and make them ringtones. And then she's like, can you do a hip hop pack? I'm like, no problem. Make a hip hop pack. She's like, can you do a world music pack? I'm like, no problem. I guess I'll have to call some session musicians, but whatever. I got this. So I call some session musicians, make the world music pack. And she's like, can you make a comedy pack? And I'm like, oh, geez, I'm not really a comedian, right? But what the hell? I'll give it a shot. So, I go make this comedy pack and I'm like, okay, so what sounds are funny in 2 seconds or less? What sounds are always funny in 2 seconds or less? And then I remembered where it all started, sampling farts on my battery-powered Casio ConcertMate 800. So I knew what I had to do. I put on Eye of the Tiger on repeat, and I got a can of beans, and I ate the baked beans and listened to Eye of the Tiger, and like put on a headband and got the most expensive mic I could get my hands on, and I farted on that mic and recorded it and sold it to Microsoft in my comedy ringtone back for a work visa and a bunch of money and moved to the US. And that is why you should never give up on your dreams. All right, so the point of that story was not, yes, to tell you a little bit more about who I am and why I'm here, but also I want you to understand a little bit about the dynamics of the music industry, especially as it pertains to where you're at, When I was first starting out, I had this really tough to remember name, the Fat Conductor. It sounds weird. It's got lots of syllables. Nobody can spell. It's hard to remember. And it just wasn't getting me the traction. But then, and plus I was making music that was genre music. I was making breaks, like UK style break beats. It was a very specific genre. And I was making exactly that genre with a very awkward, hard to remember name. So, of course, people didn't really care. If you try and make everybody like you, no one's going to love you. They all might like you, but no one's going to love you for trying to make everyone like you. But if you just don't, if you try and make some people love you and just let the other people not love you, you'll do a lot better. All right. So, now, okay. Before we get into that, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But before we get into that, let's just talk about your music business. And it's important to think about it as a business, even if it's just a hobby, because you really got to make an impact. You want someone to listen to your music, right? You want someone, even if you're trying to make like the weirdest music that's just for yourself, you want somebody to like it. And if you want somebody to like it, you need to know how to spread ideas, and you need to know how marketing works, and you need to know how to release your music. So whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, it's important to ask yourself this question: who do musicians work for? In the entertainment industry, who do you work for? Okay. Is it the suits, like the managers or the agents? They might cut you a check, but do you work for them? Or what about the labels? You can work for a record label, you're making music, they're paying you sometimes. Do you work for labels? Or how about promoters? Do you work for promoters or venues? They're usually the ones cutting the check. Or bloggers in the media. Or how about radio plays, royalties? Do you work for that? Well, I'd put it to you that these are all people you work with. And if you let them give you orders, you're messing up. And that was really a big mistake that I made as the Fat Conductor. I was treating all these people like I was working for them, right? But ultimately, these people are all just go-betweens for the real boss, the real person that you work for. And the sooner you realize this, the sooner you will start making real progress. Because who you really work for is these people. The fans, the people who live and die for the music, the people where your song is the soundtrack to their life, the people who like play your music at their wedding, or when their mom just died, they go to their car and bump your music, or the people who, given the option between pirate your music for free or buy the like $100 box set with the vinyl, they'll get the $100 box set. These people don't just buy one ticket, they bring their 10 friends to your show for their birthday party because they know it's going to be the best thing ever. The people who live and die for music and who are obsessed with music. Those are the people buying the tickets. Those are the people supporting you. Those are the people that are calling, that should be calling the shots. All those other people in the middle, the managers, the agents, the label people, the promoters, the media, they love to tell you what to do. Like, people will tell you what to do, but you shouldn't really take them too seriously, or you can end up compromising your artistic vision. You know, these are the people whose opinion you should be taking seriously. The fans. The fans they're the engine of your success. They're your marketing team. They're there to bail you out when you're in trouble. They're there to support you every month on Patreon or whatever. These people are it, okay? So start making music for the fans and structure. Everything is about them. The sooner you can structure it all about them, the sooner you're going to start getting traction with your music. And a lot of people, they get kind of like turned off by talk of the music industry, but understand that when I'm talking about the music industry and stuff, really what I'm talking about is how to reach these people, how to reach these fans. So even if you don't want to make a living as a musician, you still need to understand the dynamics of connecting with fans, okay? So the question is, how do you get fans? How do you grow your fan base? Okay, how do you get fans and how do you grow your fan base? And this is important whether you want to be in the industry or you just want people to listen to your music. This is essential, okay? So we used to think, and a lot of people still do think, that you can just spend a bunch of money on marketing and you'll have tons of fans, okay? A lot of people think that that's how it works. But the problem is we're just surrounded by tons and tons and tons of advertising all the time, just the top volume blasting us with advertising, right? I mean, you probably ignored $1 billion worth of ads today, you know, and it's really easy to, you know, to be a bit like sour grapes about music and be like, oh, well, you know, Steve Aoki, all he does is like play other people's music and throw cakes at people. And like, if my dad was a millionaire and I spent a bunch of money on marketing, I could throw cakes at people too, whatever. It's not so special. Like, it's easy to kind of get into that trap and to just sit there like, you know, hating on the industry like it's like this person. But marketing is not enough to make people like something. Marketing is not enough. You know, otherwise, like the Emoji Movie. I remember I was living in New York when the Emoji Movie came out, and in Times Square, there were these ads, like 100-foot high Times Square ads. It probably cost like $1 million a week to rent the ad space for those ads. And nobody saw the Emoji Movie. We all collectively were like, that looks dumb, ignore, and nobody saw it. We just ignored it collectively as a culture. We will ignore millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of advertising every day. So how do you reach people that are ignoring you? How do you reach people that are ignoring you? Okay, well, you can't just buy your way in. What you got to do is make them want to talk about you. You need to create a conversation. Yeah, you're writing music, but bigger picture, you need to create a conversation with your art or your music or your whatever you're doing. You need to create a conversation, okay? Because think about, you know, when I think about how everything came to me, you know, it was from creating a conversation. Like when I was the only person making commercial Ableton templates, I had this wacky video with me wearing a helmet, pretending to drive a spaceship and shit. That was crazy. That was a conversation. Like, hey, have you seen that video? Did you know commercial Ableton templates are a thing? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then all my business came to me from word of mouth, from people being like, hey, you know what's interesting? This. And talking about it. You know, so pretty much all of your business, all of your fans, they're all going to come to you through what I call the conversation conduit. Okay. So this slide, if I had known this from the beginning, I would have done so many things differently. This slide would have saved like 10 years of being the fat conductor. This would have saved me 10 years of butting my head against the wall if I understood this. All right, so are you ready to learn the conversation conduit? If you're ready, type yes into the chat box. And I'll teach you the conversation conduit. Okay, because this is essential. Oh, wow, a lot of familiar faces in the chat. Cool. Okay, so the conversation conduit goes like this. And remember when I was playing at Burning Man for False Profit, I got hooked up with Microsoft and got to work because it came to the US, okay? This is how that happened. So interesting music is playing. Step one, make music that is interesting, okay? If you don't do that, you're not going to create a conversation. But your music is playing, and two friends are in a situation where they're listening to music. Maybe it's a long distance car ride. Maybe they're at a club. Maybe they're working and the music's playing in the background. And an interesting song will come on. And friend one will say, "Hey, friend number two, what is this interesting music?" To which friend two will reply, "Well, that's the song, fill in the blank, by the artist, fill in the blank." Friend number one will go, interesting. And they'll have this conversation maybe 10 times during a music listening session. And then time passes. Cue the Jeopardy theme. And then later, friend number one is by themselves and they want to listen to music, but not the music they already have. No, they've listened to all that. They want something new, something exciting, something different. So they will go into their memory and they will try to remember something to look up. And if your music isn't memorable, and if your name is not memorable, you're fucked. You need to have memorable music and a memorable name. And then friend number one will stick their head, like imagine like a raffle barrel, like their brain is like a raffle barrel, and there's all these tickets in there. You don't want some like tiny ass hard to remember ticket. You want like a big ticket that like, that you can't help but think about, something that's striking and different, because it's got to jog their memory. And then if you jog their memory, they'll say, "Hey Google, I want to listen to the artist, fill in the blank." And your artist name has got to be short, memorable, and easy to spell from a verbal conversation from memory, because you got to remember a conversation you've had and then type that into Google. Okay? If your name is like, Mandelbrot's elephant, or like, Lavencio, or something that's like some might have some clever meaning, or like, be derived from the Latin blah blah blah, or like it's the Swahili word for love or something. Nobody's going to remember that shit. Nobody is going to be able to type that into Google from memory. Okay? And then so you got to have a short, memorable, easy to spell artist name. A lot of those old school dubstep guys, they have some of the best names, like Hacha, Benga. And like, Skrillex is a great name. Dude, you can hear it and you can just hear how to spell it. Diplo, you can hear how to spell that name just from saying it. Okay? So, it's got to be short, memorable, easy to spell from memory. And then they'll say, "Hey Google, I want to listen to the artist X." And if your SEO is good, Google will say, "Hey, here's the online portal to artist X." So you got to have artistname.com. You got to have soundcloud.com/artistname. You got to have twitter.com/artistname, and they all got to match, because otherwise when people Google you, they're going to go to Spotify first. They're going to go to somewhere else where there's like, someone else who has a SEO team. They're not going to end up at your website, and they're not going to end up at your portal, because it's only when they end up at your website and at your portal that you get to participate in the conversation you started and say, "Here is a reward if you become my fan. Here is a reward if you become my fan." And then you got to have something that they want. Maybe it's a free Ableton workshop. Maybe it's a download of some kind, but you've got to reward people and tell them that you want them to become your fan, and how to sign up. Because people, you got to convert that traffic into new fans. People can come to your SoundCloud and listen and never take action unless you have a track that you can offer in exchange for downloads. And same thing with your Facebook. People will go to your Facebook, check it out, and just leave and not become a fan unless you tell them and reward them to become your fan. So this conversation conduit, this is essential. Whether you want you want to just make fans of your music, or whether you're trying to start a business, you gotta optimize your whole reality to make this process easy, because this is what the process of getting new fans looks like. This is what the process of getting new listeners looks like. This is what the process of spreading your idea in the modern world is. So pay attention to the conversation conduit and make it your friend. You need to have interesting music that is unique in some way, that does something that no other music does, that it's not just your version of some artist you like or your version of some genre you like. You've got to make interesting music that takes risks and does something different and striking. Because in the conversation, the context of the conversation conduit, it is better to suck memorably than to be forgettably excellent. In the context of the conversation conduit, it's better to suck memorably than to be forgettably excellent. okay? Because you're rewarded for being bold, for being striking, for being different. That's what makes you stand out, okay? Not being good, not not making a perfect copy of some artist you like. That's not what makes you stand out. What makes you stand out is being bold and different and unique and having a short, memorable artist name that leads you to an online portal where you can reward people for becoming your fan. Okay, so that took me 10 years to learn, so enjoy that. All right, now I've done a lot of things right along the way, but a good deal of me telling you all these stories is so I can show you what I've done wrong. I've done many things very wrong. Made a lot of mistakes, but that's just what learning is. Mistakes are what learning looks like. And an expert is someone who's made every mistake in a given domain. That's what makes you an expert. So I discovered all this stuff the hard way by, blood, sweat, and tears and much embarrassment. But you get to cheat and learn the easy way. All right, so let's talk about the hard way first. And this may sound familiar. Okay, so the hard way, the surefire way to just make your life hell is to try to make one perfect thing. Trying to make one perfect thing is a recipe for procrastination. Okay, it is a recipe for procrastination. We'll get into that later. But we all want to make quality results, but if you put quality first, you get procrastination. Okay, we're going to get into that later. So do not try to make one perfect thing, or you will be artistically constipated for the rest of your life and make nothing. All right, working without a plan. I used to think that if I just worked as hard as I could just stay up all night taking drugs and just plow through it. And nope, you just spin your wheels, you burn yourself out. You are not going to get where you want to go unless you got a map, okay? So working without a plan, working without a map is a disaster, because what happens when you work without a plan? You get lost finding or making sounds, right? Because it's an infinity of possible sounds. You don't know which one you want to use for what. You don't have a map, so you're lost finding or making sounds. And what happens when you get lost finding or making sounds? You get stuck in a loop, listening to the same 8 bars, the same 16 bars again and again and again. And you can, all this shit, it takes as long as you let it. You can let one loop take the rest of your life, okay? And what happens when you get stuck and you listen to the loop again and again and again and again? This little demon comes in the back of your head and it says, that doesn't sound like my hero. That doesn't sound like the artist that I love. That sounds like poo-poo. I don't like that. It was so much work making this loop. It took us 6 months to make this loop. Is it going to take another 6 months to finish this song? That was a lot of work and it sounds like crap. So why don't we, that doesn't sound like my favorite artist. So why don't we just give up and start again? And then when we do get a loop that sounds amazing, then we'll put in all the work to finish it, right? That's how the trap goes. And then what happens? You give up and you start over. And it's an endless cycle, because if you don't get in the habit of finishing tracks, let's say you do listen to that demon in the back of your head who's like, I'm a perfectionist. I don't want to release anything bad. This doesn't sound like my hero. Time to give up and start over. Let's say you listen to that demon and you finally do make a perfect loop that meets the demon's criteria for perfection. Then you try and finish it. Well, guess what? If you didn't finish all of your bad tracks, you're not going to know how to finish any tracks. So then you're going to ruin the good one that you waited so long for, and then you're going to end up with nothing again, okay? So if this sounds familiar, don't worry. We all do this. We all do this. Every producer does this. That's just how it starts. That's how it starts. It's doing everything the hard way, doing everything the backwards way, and punishing yourself and getting upset. Why do we all do this? Well, I think I figured it out. There are some limiting beliefs that we're going to need to address to get to the bottom of the question why. But some of these might be a little painful for you, okay? So do you want me to rip the Band-Aid off slow or rip it off fast? Rip it off slow or fast? Type into the chat whether you want me to rip the Band-Aid off fast or slow, okay? Because I can be sensitive. Or, okay, there's one slow, both, you maniac. Okay, cool. All right, yeah, mostly fast. Okay, so we'll do it fast. I'll go through this section quick. If there's something in this section that you don't agree with, just please understand that I'm saying this to help you and that I used to hold all of these limiting beliefs. Every one of these limiting beliefs I used to have as my belief, and I had to learn that it was wrong. Okay, and I'm just trying to help you by sharing this. So if any of this offends you, just please bear with me. It's coming from a place of love. I'm just trying to help you. But yeah, be patient. Okay, so limiting beliefs. I'm a perfectionist. Don't rush me. We all have this one, okay? And you got to recognize perfectionism is rationalized procrastination. You can't do anything imperfect if you don't do anything at all. You can't do anything imperfect if you don't do anything at all. Because we all want to receive praise and dodge criticism. And if you don't finish something, you get to kind of have your cake and eat it too in that way. Your friend will come over and your friend will be like, hey, can I see some music? Or maybe you're like, hey, come check out my tracks. And you play your half-finished track for your friend, and one of two things will happen. Your friend will either go, oh, this is really great, I like this, in which case you can accept the praise. Or they'll say, hey, this is not so good, I don't like this. And then you get to dodge the criticism by saying, well, yeah, but it's not done yet. It'll be better when it's done. And then you get to have none of the criticism and all of the praise, which is great. You get to have your cake and eat it too. So you got to recognize that the demon of ego in the back of your mind doesn't want you to try and fail. It doesn't want, because you can't fail if you don't try, and you can't do anything imperfect if you don't finish anything. So when someone says to me, I'm a perfectionist, I hear I'm a procrastinator, because the operational manifestation of perfectionism is procrastination. And that's just how it goes. That's just how it goes. So that is what happens. You can't do anything imperfect if you don't do anything. You got to recognize that there's no right and wrong in music. The only mistake is hesitation. The only mistake is hesitation. So if you just train yourself to stop being a perfectionist and just keep the process moving, you are going to end up getting increasingly perfect with time. But you got to understand, perfectionism is procrastination. Perfectionism is procrastination. Okay, so I had that belief for a long time, and I had to learn that was wrong. Okay, another limiting belief: you have to be an expert to make good music. I thought this for years. You have to be an expert to make good music. Often the best music is made by amateurs and experimenters, and a lot of the time music made by like super hardcore experts is really kind of like boring or alienating to listen to. A lot of the music that is the best is made by amateurs or experimenters, and that's because discovery is key in music, and it takes a childlike, playful spirit to go out there and get your hands dirty and make mistakes and to make the happy accidents, right? And you got to recognize that a lot of the best sounds are from happy accidents. They're from misusing equipment, from people doing things wrong, right? Like, for example, the 808. Everybody, you say 808 now, everybody's like, oh, 808 bass, 808 bass, But the 808 is actually a drum machine. And in the original 808 kick drum, if you're using an 808 drum machine, you can't change the pitch of the 808. It's just like, you can just change how long it is, but you can't really tune it. You can't tune it like playing a keyboard. And I think it was either Arthur Baker or I forget who sampled the first 808, but someone figured out that if you sample the 808 and put it in a sampler and play a bass line with it, you get like the sickest bass ever. But the 808 is a drum machine, and using a drum machine to make bass was a huge breakthrough. A sound could be both drum and bass, breaking the rules, doing it wrong. And that sound became like one of the most popular sounds in all of electronic music ever. Another classic sound, the 303. That's the sound of that like squelchy, like acid synthesizer from Acid House and stuff. That thing was actually a bassline generator, and it was someone who didn't read the manual and just decided to turn it up 2 octaves and turn the distortion all the way up, and they made that 303 acid like lead sound in the highs and mids. But the 303 was for bass lines, and it was actually using it wrong that became the popular use of it. Okay, you also got to recognize many people's careers, many big careers were started by quick, stupid tunes. When I was growing up, There was this artist named Tiga, who was a really big electro producer and promoter in Montreal, which is close to where I grew up in Ottawa. So we'd go to Montreal to party on the weekends and stuff. And Tiga made all this like really good music, but it was like really kind of serious music. And what was the turning point in his career was he had like some friend over from like out of town, like some DJ that he booked, and he was showing them the studio, and he was like, hey, you know, like, this is the studio. He's like, oh, show me how you do things. And as a joke, they made a remix of Sunglasses at Night by Corey Hart, and they made the remix of like, God, like 3 hours or something, and just put it out like just kind of as a joke, you know? And that track blew up and was like one of the biggest electro tracks of the year that year. And Tiga, you know, he used to be all upset because he'd be like, oh man, you know, people only ever know me because that stupid track, but it was listening to this like comedy song that he made that actually ended up getting people interested in his serious music. Likewise, Bauer from the Harlem Shake, right? The Harlem Shake, it was not a hit when it came out. You know, it was just a free download on Diplo's Jeffries label. And, you know, it was just like Bauer being like, oh, here's a silly trap dance tune, you know, it's like party time, whatever, you know, and made it and put it out. And then when the Harlem Shake blew up, suddenly it's like millions and millions and millions of plays and it's a hit. And Bauer makes way better music than the Harlem Shake, and he makes way more serious music than the Harlem Shake. But because the Harlem Shake blew up, Bauer's like a household name forever. You know, so, you know, you got to recognize that a lot of the time it's the quickest, silliest, goofiest music that really resonates with people. And they don't call it playing music because you're like not supposed to have fun. You know, you're supposed to be having fun. You're supposed to be taking risks and experimenting and doing different playful things to make your music. And a lot of the time, like, as we become more and more adult, we're so worried about doing things the right way that we forget to have fun. We forget to experiment. We forget to play. We forget to actually like make music a joy, you know? And really, like, most people are not music experts, you know? They're just connecting to the music at an emotional level. And if the music is like coming from a place of fun and joy and experimentation and playfulness, people connect to that way more than like, you know, your mix down or like your, you know, it's like anything else. Like, we get so hung up trying to like impress other musicians and trying to do everything the fanciest, most legit way. But you know what? The progress of technology is such that what is like, you know, what takes tons of skill now, in like 5 years from now, there's going to be a plugin for that. And, you know, that skill that the person was basing their whole piece of music on, that skill, if that skill becomes irrelevant because of some plugin, no one's going to care about that level of skill anymore. But what they are going to care about is what it makes them feel, you know? And it's so easy to get caught up in trying to do things the right way and in trying to be an expert and trying to impress people that you forget to make your music fun, you know? And some of the best, most fun music is made by amateurs. And there's really, even as an amateur, you know, there's nothing stopping you from making a piece of music that people love, you know? I mean, look at that like Walmart yodeling kid. Like he's just yodeling at Walmart and now he's got like a record deal and shit, you know? Like if you can just bring joy to people, that's what it's all about. Bring joy to people, you know? And an amateur can still totally bring high levels of joy, right? So you really do not have to be an expert to make good music, but you do have to be an experimenter and you do have to be playful. But you can be a playful experimenter right now. All right, another limiting belief. Complex songs are better than simple ones. I used to fall into this, trying to make everything epic all the time. Oh man, that just makes it way more of a headache. Good song needs to do one thing really well. It does not need to do everything. Okay, it does not need to do everything. And a lot of the time when you try and make everything epic and you add all these extra sections and stuff, you're just making your listener wait to get to the good stuff, you know? So like try and remember the verse of any Aerosmith song. You ever go out to karaoke? Like everybody knows the chorus, but what happens when the verse comes around? People awkwardly look at their friends and they can't even remember the melody. The words are right there. They still can't sing it because they can't even remember the melody to the verse. People only remember the chorus. Or like try to remember Beethoven's Fourth Symphony. No, all I remember is ba 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 ba. Like a kid could have written that melody. It's so simple, but it's memorable. It's striking, right? That's what it's all about, being memorable and striking. Okay, extra sections just make your listener wait. And Dave Grohl introduced me to this amazing phrase: don't bore us, get to the chorus. I love it. Don't bore us, get to the chorus. Another limiting belief, and this is really common, I run into people time and time again who tell me, listen, I know the fundamentals, I got the fundamentals down, I just need to learn mixing and mastering to make my music amazing. And most of the time, if you like, well, you got to recognize, first of all, 80% of mixing is picking the right sounds and putting them at the right volume. And that the volume is your number one mixing tool, leveling, right? Just getting the right volumes relative to each other. That's why any mixing board, closest thing to the mixing engineer is the volume. You know, it's the volume. That's the most important thing. And a lot of people, they get excited like, oh, I want to add all these plugins and blah, 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 blah. And they get so carried away. They get like the most rudimentary knowledge of the fundamentals, and then they'll go right into like, how can I make Skrillex bass? How can I make the glitchiest beats ever? How can I do whatever? And you got to recognize you can never be good enough at the fundamentals, okay? It's like a bottomless well. The more you put into the fundamentals, the better your music gets, and it never, ever stops. You can just keep getting better at the fundamentals. You know, you can keep getting better at the fundamentals, and like all the trickery and stuff from crazy sound design and fancy plugins and stuff, that is no substitute for, you know, being good at songwriting, being good at expressing yourself clearly, being able to say a lot with a little. You know, that's really, really important. And when you're mixing too, like I will have people who are at kind of an intermediate level where they can write a song that sounds complete, but then they fucking wreck it when they do their mix downs because they're trying to like bring all the crazy plugins all the time and like try and get the highs as loud as they can and the lows as loud as they can and the sound as wide as it can be and everything. But if you're like taking some sound that's like a boring kind of shitty mono sound and you're trying to add high end, it just comes out kind of skewed sounding, you know, and it sounds like everything's been pumped up and overdriven, and the sound, it stops sounding good. So if you want, next time you find yourself like, oh, I want more highs in my mix down, don't try and squeeze high end out of a sound that doesn't have high end. Go find a sound with high end and layer it on top of the sound that needs more highs. So like a lot of the time people will use a white noise in a synth patch, and like the patch might be playing a melody, but if you have that little bit of like static on a TV tuned to the wrong channel, that little bit of white noise will really make the mix come alive. Or like when you're layering drum sounds, if your kick is too muffled, don't try and boost highs that aren't there. Layer up like a little piece of white noise with a tiny little envelope going click, 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 and your brain will glue it together with the kick, and it'll sound like it's part of the kick, even though it's like this extra layer on top. Same thing with bass. Two people are always like, oh, I want to make my bass lines really rip. You know what? The bass is not hard. It's just one sine wave at the bottom. As long as you have a sine wave that is below 100 hertz, that is 6 dB quieter than your kick, you will have good bass. You just got to make sure there's nothing else down there, and it's only a sine wave at the bottom. It's literally like the easiest patch you can possibly make. It's just a sine wave, okay? And you know, I can't even tell you how many times people are like, you know, they'll have some synth that doesn't have a sub, you know, there's no sine wave an octave down, and they'll be like, man, I just can't get the bass to come in. I'm like, that's because there's no bass in your sound. You know, if you just put a sine wave all the way at the bottom and turn it up really loud, you'll have great bass every time. You know, same thing with the highs. Like if you take sounds that have naturally occurring high end, like white noise or field recordings, or like crumple some paper next to a microphone and layer it on top of your bass, rub the mic on your stubble. That's another really good one. Or like gas escaping from a spray can nozzle. You know, putting that in with your drums, it sounds so awesome because those sounds, you don't have to overdrive them to get the highs. The highs are already there. You just have to layer them and articulate them with the parts that they're supposed to be layering with. And then the listener will glue them back together into one sound, okay? So these sort of like basic fundamentals like sound selection, volume leveling, songwriting, arrangement, etc., you can never be good enough at the fundamentals. If you say you're good enough at the fundamentals to yourself, you're basically saying, I'm gonna stop learning, right? Because when you're like, I'm already good at this, you stop learning. right? You need to always approach the fundamentals and always approach anything that you can learn as though it is a bottomless well. But the fundamentals especially are a bottomless well. You can just keep getting better at the fundamentals. There's no such thing as being good enough at the fundamentals. You know, there's no such thing. Okay, so another really important limiting belief, I need to buy more gear and software. No, you don't. No, you don't. If you talk to any musician who's doing well, they'll tell you you don't need software. Any kid with any computer can do it. You got to ask yourself, who are the ones telling you to buy new gear and software? Is it like, you know, music magazines and gear companies and like, you know, nerds on gear forums on the internet forwarding that stuff around? Is this a person who is finishing music that is propelling their career? Or is this someone who's, you know, it's like the famous Buddhist line about the finger pointing at the moon. Don't focus on the finger or you miss all the heavenly glory. You know, it's like going to a restaurant and eating the menu. Okay, the gear is just a way, it's a tool for conveying emotion. Conveying emotion you can do without gear. You know, I got my record deal just cutting up samples on a not music PC with a home stereo speakers. Didn't have a MIDI controller, didn't have monitors, didn't have a sound card, and I still got a record deal. You know, I used to know a guy who was on a record with Aphex Twin while he was technically homeless. He was a couch surfing drug fiend, very charismatic, really nice guy, but he had serious substance abuse issues. And he didn't even own a computer or a hard drive. He just had a stack of burned CDs. And he would stay at people's houses, and when they went to work, he would set up a copy of Acid Pro on their PC while they went to work, and he would start cutting up breakbeats and stuff and made records. And he was on a record with Aphex Twin while he was homeless and didn't own a computer. Okay, so you do not need to have the craziest software. You do not need to have that new synthesizer. You do not need to have the full Native Instruments complete or any of that, okay? The only thing that you need is time spent learning and time spent making music. That's it. That's it, okay? And you gotta recognize 99% of your favorite music from over the years is made on computers way worse than yours. Like one of my favorite albums ever, Surrounded by Tipper, was made entirely on a laptop and headphones, and it was made on the less than a 1 gigahertz computer, like before they even had Intel Macs. And he made this incredible record just on a laptop, not even using a sound card or anything. And so gear, it's always sold as though, you know, this piece of gear is going to make it simpler. This piece of software is going to make it simpler. But in actual reality, the more gear you use and the more software and the more plugins you use, the more complicated it makes the process. Okay? And, you know, there's definitely a lot to be said for limiting your options and just sticking to the fundamentals of songwriting and arranging and just making sure that people can really feel what you're trying to communicate, you know? And if you still think you need gear, you gotta recognize, damn, Kendrick Lamar, damn, the album was made on an iPhone. All the beats were made on an iPhone, and the producer got a Grammy for a beat he made on an iPhone. Okay, so you do not need more gear, you do not need more software. Gear obsession is another form of procrastination. And when I say gear, I mean software. Gear and software obsession is another form of procrastination. And you'll find the people who really geek out hard on that shit, they're not finishing a lot of music, okay? So very important. So those are some limiting beliefs. Hopefully that wasn't too painful. All right, so you ready to learn for the most important thing I learned in all of my writer's block? And hell, if you're ready for the most important thing that I learned from 18 months of writer's block, then yeah. Type yes into the chat, and I will tell you the most important lesson that I could possibly tell you. This is like the central point. If this was a doctoral dissertation, this would be the thesis of this whole presentation, okay? The most important thing I've learned over time, we all want to make quality music. No one wants to make crap. We all want to make quality music, okay? But how do you get quality music? How do you actually get quality? Well, I learned this. From quantity comes quality. From quantity comes quality. So if you want to make quality music, the first skill is not how do I learn about how high quality digital audio? How do I, how do I learn about how monitors work, or learning how to tune an analog synth, or how a compressor works? No, a lot of places will start you there. I don't start you there. I start you with the most important possible skill, and that is finishing. Finishing is the most important possible skill. You can learn how to make a finished track just by cutting and pasting audio and setting the volume levels correctly. You can make something sound finished. And a lot of a lot of your favorite music was made with literally just cut, copy, paste, and volume. That's it. Okay? Because finishing is what gets you quantity. So once you learn finishing, the second skill to learn is speed. Okay? Because speed of finishing gets you quantity, quantity gets you quality. So speed of finishing gets you quantity, quantity gets you quality.
Step in my dojo, you step. Step in my dojo, you step in my